Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Unto whom the princes of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, to Mishael, and to Mishael of Meshach, and Azariah of Abednego. Isn't it amazing how the world will want to put their own name on you? Do you realize that the names they had were names that brought praise unto God? Their original names. And isn't it amazing how so many times that man will come along and he'll think he's got something better for you. Man says, hey, I got a better idea. Hey, I got a better plan. I got a better name for you. So you know what? They started referring to them by these new names. And you know what? It's amazing. How today we still live in the same environments. Verse 8 says, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. You know what's amazing today? Because you know Jesus said, it's not what's on the outside that defiles a man. He said it's for what comes out of the heart that defiles the man, right? What comes out from the inside, what you begin to speak and what you begin to proclaim and the things that you begin to do, because that's what you desire within yourself. It said he desired within himself not to be defiled. You know what? We got to get to the point today that we desire to not be a defiled temple for God. We've got to learn today that we need to live a life that is holy before Him. We got to live a life that's of what God wants, not what man wants, not what man offers you, but what God has provided. God's provision for you. And you know what? Today a lot of people say, well, you know what? God's provision is not enough for me. I want more. Well, there's your problem. You want more than what God already has for you. Let me tell you something. God knows what you need before you ever know it. There's nobody that knows better what you need than God does. So that's why you just need to learn to trust Him. You know what? If He says, you know what? If God doesn't bless you with some particular thing, that don't mean that you're not supposed to have it. It means that God says you don't need it. That's not necessary for you. You know, another thing, you can want and desire things in your life and it not be what God wants for you, and you keep wanting it, so therefore it ends up coming to you and it becomes a hindrance. See, God knows what will hinder you. You know what? God don't want His people hindered. He wants His people free so they can serve Him and so they can worship Him. And you know what? Today, so many people today, you know what? They just said, man, you know what? I get to eat meat from the king. He's got the best meat in town. I remember when I was growing up, Winn-Dixie used to have on their sign the beef people. You remember that? And if you wanted steaks or something, you went to Winn-Dixie. They had better meat than anybody else in town. But then there was this little place down there on Reeville Road called Dill's Market. And they had the best cut of meat anywhere you could ever find. But you know what? That'd be the same thing today. People would see that and they say, you know what? God sent me to the Winn-Dixie, but I want deals. Huh? God's provision is enough. God's provision will always be exactly what you need. So Daniel said, look, you know, I really don't want to eat this and I don't want to drink this. Verse 9 said, God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. Why did God give Daniel favor? Because he was obedient, because he loved God, because he trusted God, because he wanted God's plan for his life. Huh? You know, that's how you get God's favor, is you become an absolute obedient servant to Him. And then you find yourself in that situation, you can actually say, you know what, I don't want for anything because God's provided. But see, you only get to that point when you come to the point to realize I've got to be an absolute obedient servant. Then when I am, all of a sudden God gives me favor in situations that most people would never have favor in. See, because he trusted God, God gave him favor, so therefore he would not defile himself. Verse 10, the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. And Daniel said to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. In other words, he was eating a bunch of seeds and stuff that was grown from the ground. Verse 13 says, Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenances of children that eat of the portions meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented them in this matter and proved them 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat of the portion of the king's meat. Don't tell me God can't give you exactly what you need when you trust him. If you absolutely decide within yourself, you know what, I don't want to defile myself with what the world's got to offer. I want to be God's child. I want God's provision. I want God's favor. I want God to be with me wherever I go. You see, it started early with Daniel. Do you understand that Daniel, if he wasn't to live his life the way he was living it right now, y'all better listen to me. If he wasn't living his life the way he was right now on the simplest things about not defiling himself by what was provided to him, you know what? He wouldn't have had the faith to trust God when the lion's den situation came about. He wouldn't have had the strength to get down on his knees 3 times a day and begin to pray to God when the law said don't do it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wouldn't have had the strength to stand and say, you know what? We ain't worried about you. Our God will deliver us, because they knew about God delivering them. He proved them. In the midst of what everybody else was eating, they looked better and they was more healthier. Because you know why? Because they was trusting God. I'm going to tell you today, the secret to health is trust God. Secret to healing is trusting God. Trust him. Don't question him. Trust him. We got to trust him in all things. That's why I preached so hard about listening back in December. Your eyes will deceive you. But you know what? If you're listening to what God has to say to you and you're focusing on him and you're seeking him, then he'll begin to tell you the things you need to do no matter what you see around you. Just like when Elisha and that little servant boy was together, and the little servant boy, the only thing he could see was all the people coming after him. He began to get worried. And see, he got worried not because he was listening, it was because he was looking. If he'd been listening to what Elisha had to say, he wouldn't have been worried. Elijah said, don't worry, there's more with us than there are with them. He said, well, I'm just me and you and all them army men out there. I don't know what you're talking about. Until Elisha prayed and said, God, open his eyes that he might see. Gave him the spiritual vision. And he saw the host of the army of heaven encamped around about them. And they walked out of there untouched, unscathed, didn't they? Verse 17 says, as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And you know what? When you go on a little bit further down, it tells you there was nobody found